Now, for more insight on the home building sector overall, let's bring in Jim Tobin. He is president and CEO of the National Association of Homebuilders. Jim, good to speak with you. How representative of the home building sector is Toll, would you say?
Well, I think Toll Brothers is a small portion of the home building industry. Obviously, they're in the high production portion of the industry. I know the members that NHB represents, they build about 80% of the homes in America. Build probably fewer than 25 homes a year on average, and employ less than 10 people. So really small businesses that build the bulk of homes across the country.
Well, get to the brass tacks here. I think everyone wants to know when we sort of get, or if we ever get there for that matter, to some sort of, I guess, balance. The idea that we know there's such a huge shortage, and we know that the home builders are doing whatever they feel they can do, at least in a way that's profitable to them. But do you think that we're any closer to achieving a little bit more balance in terms of supply and demand?
I do, actually. I feel more comfortable that we're going to start to meet that demand next year, obviously coming off a very slow year where we saw our forward-looking housing market index really start to crash over the last 6 months. I expect 2024 to be a much better year for us. I think we are looking at small gains in home construction in year over year. I expect interest rates, at least from the Fed, to start moderating in the second half of the year. Obviously, we see the rally in the 10-year Treasury market, which has driven those 30-year fixed-rate mortgages down. Where the break-even point is, I don't know, but certainly anything that gets farther away from 8 and closer to 6 or 6.5 is good for the market. But we still have outsized demand for housing in this country. Yeah. We still have existing homeowners sitting on the sidelines, locked in their 4% mortgages for the short term, which makes new home construction making up an inordinate amount of the marketplace month to month. In fact, new homes are actually making about 30% of the market when they're traditionally closer to 10 or 12%. So we're still the best game in town.
I'm curious about the efficiency, though, in building this from a cost perspective. I asked our previous guests over at Bloomberg Intelligence about whether the cost to build these homes is sort of moderated a certain extent from what we saw during the pandemic. We know that the supplies themselves were more expensive, but so too was the labor. And we know that the labor market is still relatively strong.
Labor market is incredibly strong. We face a skilled labor shortage when it comes to home construction. We're about 400,000 workers short month after month, and this has been going on year after year. In fact, probably up to a decade at this point. So skilled labor continues to be a drag on our industry in particular. You're right about supply chains. They certainly have moderated. That's one of the headwinds we're worried about, as we believe we're going to pick up in home construction over the next 3 or 4 years, is whether the supply chains are ready to meet that demand. We saw what happened after COVID when the home building sector really took off and kind of defied economic gravity during that time. Our supply chains ready to meet that demand again? But we do see that the cost to build a new home is down, but it's still, the interest rates, borrowing is still high, and land as well.
Yeah, and speaking of land, one thing that you point out you're worried about is that there's not enough land available, not enough lots, given that lot development is constrained by higher rates. Does that increase the likelihood of teardowns, where you buy a home that people, it hasn't been upgraded in a long time, and people tear it down to effectively create new construction there?
Yeah, that's a trend, and obviously you're close in suburbs across the country around the big metros. That trend will continue, so which means our remodeling sector, while it's flat this year, we expect that to begin to take off in 2024 as well. But then we're also going to see the ability, it's contingent on local governments being part of the housing solution by opening up new land, working with builders and developers to make sure that land is available at an affordable price, so an affordable product can be built for homeowners.
There's this new thing called the alternative dwelling units. How big of a deal is that for the home builders that you represent?
It's a big deal in those markets that are constrained, like you said, in those inner ring suburbs or in city centers themselves. Being able to rezone is really, really important, or allowing these ADUs. It's one of the big pieces to the housing affordability crisis and the supply crisis. We have to be more creative to get more units in the marketplace so we can drive the costs down by putting more supply out there.
Jim, really appreciate you taking time to be with us today. Jim Tobin, he's the president and CEO at the National Association of Home Builders.